bucket list item checked. Today I get to introduce a sitting governor. So I'm very pleased to introduce the governor of our great state, Nikki Haley. I first met Governor Haley in 2009 when she was the 82nd district, 2007 when she was the 82nd district representative to the state legislature. I felt a kinship with her immediately because she was a mom and a small business woman. I was impressed with her desire to not complain about government, but to become involved and change it. I've been most impressed in her term as governor with her pro-business initiatives. Governor Haley has announced over 47,000 new jobs for South Carolina and more than $12 billion invested in South Carolina. I consider Governor Haley an advocate for South Carolina and a friend to business. But most of all, I consider her a friend to me and my family. Please give a warm Spring Valley welcome to Governor Nikki Haley.
Thank you very much. It's great to be back with you again, and it's always great to see Elise. This is kind of a crazy day in Columbia. It's the last day of legislative session, and so there's a lot of political drama going on. So we're watching it carefully, and I'm sure the news will be exciting tonight. You know, when we look on the TV, when we hear the news, when we listen to the radio, the one thing we continue to hear is the American dream is dead. What happened to the American dream? How do we get it back? What did we lose? How do we fix it? And when I think back to that, I think back to my parents. My parents left everything in India to come here because they wanted the American dream for their children. They loved the fact that only in this country could you be anything you wanted to be and nothing would get in your way. They came here with $8 in their pocket, started a business out of the living room of their home, and 30 plus years later it was a multi-million-dollar company. But there was never a day that it was easy. Now look at South Carolina. Back in 2011, we had just gone through a terrible recession. Our companies weren't expanding. There weren't companies that were coming in. What I always knew was if you helped someone find a job, you took care of a family. We had a lot of families to take care of. And so we basically said, we're going to have a business plan for the state of South Carolina. And the first thing we have to understand is we have to get into the customer service business. So every agency director we brought in, we said if you were costing a person or a business time, then you are costing them money, and that is no longer acceptable in the state of South Carolina. We looked at our permitting board, where permits went to die, and buildings never happened, and businesses couldn't get anywhere. We replaced everybody off the DHEC board. We put all business people on the board, and the chairman of that board is the president of a construction company. We looked at all the public servants that worked in the state government, and we said, you're going to start answering the phones. It's a great day in South Carolina. How may I help you? They hated that. They hated that so much. But the whole point of it was we wanted them to be proud of where they worked. And more importantly, we wanted them to remember who it was that they worked for. Answer that question on the other side of the line. Solve that problem. Get them to a resolution. We looked at the fact that we were the only state in the Southeast that did not cap damages on lawsuits. So we hunkered down with the House and Senate. We gave them an ultimatum. We passed tort reform, and it brought us back competitive with all the other Southeastern states. And then I knew, having grown up in Bamberg, that if we were truly going to lift up South Carolina, we had to lift up all parts of South Carolina, not just our cities, but our rural areas too. So we went into commerce and we said to the project managers, you've always gotten paid for a bonus when you close a project. Now we're going to give you a higher bonus if you close it in a rural area than if you close it in an urban area. And then we started to sell South Carolina. And magic happened. And what I can tell you now is we build planes now with Boeing. We are the #1 BMW producer in the world right now, adding on the new X7s. We're the #1 tire producing state in the country now with Michelin, Bridgestone, and Continental. And if you haven't heard about carbon fiber, it's the next big thing, and we just brought the largest carbon fiber producer, Toray Industries out of Japan, is now calling South Carolina home. We have announced over 49,000 jobs in South Carolina, $12 billion, but the beauty of it, in 45 out of 46 counties. Almost every county is starting to see what it was. So you look at where we were in 2011, we had reached a high of 11.1%. Now, 5.3% in the state of South Carolina. We have more people working in South Carolina than ever in the history of the state. You can go and you can look at what we're doing, and the fact is, look at the fact that we're now the first flat screen manufacturer in the country. 500 jobs in Winsboro, South Carolina. Colgate-Palmolive, 300 jobs in Greenwood, South Carolina. Lewis Hornick Textiles, 125 jobs in Allendale. So our rural areas are starting to see great growth. We have one of the fastest growing economies in the country. We have the fastest growing economy on the East Coast. And what I will now tell you is I'm proud to say they call us the beast of the Southeast, and I will take that. And so we are continuing to push very hard, and we are doing every bit of it without the unions. We have no unions in South Carolina because the people in South Carolina continue to want that direct relationship with their employer. And the employers understand you have to take care of those that take care of you. So when you talk about the American dream and you look at what we've done, a lot of what we have to remember is we also have to be creative with what DC pushes down. The hardest part of my job continues to be DC. But if you look at what they give you, we don't always have to take what they say as true and the way it should be. We'll give you an example of welfare. When we came in, another negative aspect of what we heard across South Carolina is, why am I paying for that person on the couch? Why won't they get up and work? Why aren't you doing something about welfare? So we tested it. Before, when someone came into the welfare office, we'd check the boxes and we'd hand them a check. Now in South Carolina, when somebody comes into the welfare office, we check the boxes and we say, what do you do? What are you good at? What's your skill set? We take the information they give us, we match them up with businesses, and to date we have taken over 20,000 people off of welfare and put them to work. What that goes to show us is they don't want to sit on the couch. They want to make their families proud. They want to be productive citizens. I didn't hire one extra person to do that. The only thing we did was reminded state government and those agencies, your focus is never on giving a check. Your focus should always be on helping them get a job. So while we've had great success on welfare to work, we're getting ready to do food stamp to work. We're getting ready to do prisoners to work. We're going to make sure that we lift up all people, because at the end of the day, that's the goal. It's how do we lift people up so that they want to do for themselves. And this is the way to do it. Now, there are certain things that we're always going to struggle with. Federal government, when they give us a hard time, we're going to continue to do that. And you saw what happened with the National Labor Relations Board. Here we had gotten 1,000 jobs in Charleston, South Carolina at a time that we needed. Boeing had just announced 2,000 jobs in Washington State. Not a single person was hurt. Yet the National Labor Relations Board went and sued that great American company and said they couldn't create those jobs. But we got loud. We did what we do. We spread the word. We spread it not just around South Carolina because it was a national issue. We spread it across the country. And those 1,000 jobs that we fought for 3 years ago are now 8,000 jobs in Charleston, South Carolina. That's what that fight meant for South Carolina. That's what that fight meant for Boeing. And so what we need to remember is when anyone tells us that the American dream is dead, look back at those. But there was always one part that sat with me that I knew we had not addressed. My daughter is blessed. She goes to the Big River Bluff High School in Lexington, where every classroom has a 72-inch TV and every child has a tablet. Yet when I went back home to my hometown of Bamberg to give an anti-bullying speech, they didn't even have a piece of equipment for me to play a video on. That's immoral. That's wrong. For too long, South Carolina has educated our children based on the fact of where they're born and raised. We needed to change the fact that education needs to be about the fact that each child deserves a good education, and that is our future workforce. So over 1.5 years ago, I said in the State of the State address, I said we're going to have a year-long conversation on education. I knew that if I threw something out there, the legislature would shoot at it, and I also knew that I needed to learn a little bit more about why we were doing the things we were doing in education. So we spent that year talking to teachers and principals and superintendents, charter schools, homeschoolers, deans of universities, anybody that could give us insight on education in South Carolina. And what it came down to was this. We have never acknowledged poverty in South Carolina when it comes to education. It costs $1,200 more per child to educate a child in poverty. So what we said was we're going to change it. The new funding formula we proposed would give 20% more to all children in poverty, meaning Medicaid or free or reduced lunch. It'd give 20% more for non-English speaking students. It's not that they can't learn, but it takes longer. Would give more money for gifted and talented because we want to keep those really smart students challenged and moving forward. And then we said we're going to put more money into ages 17 through 21 that are desperately trying to get over the finish line and they just can't make it. We have 800,000 people in South Carolina that do not have a GED out of a state of 4.5 million. It's just too many. So what we're going to do is make sure that we focus on that group and help them get to where they need to go so we don't add to that number. But I didn't want to just throw money at the system. I wanted it to be targeted. I wanted us to be able to get results. So we focused on two main things. Reading was the first one. One of the people I talked to when I was doing my studying about the education initiative was Governor Jeb Bush. And I said, you did this in Florida. What can you tell me? He said, if there's anything you do, make sure your kids can read by 3rd grade. And we looked back at that. And so what we've proposed is there's a reading coach in every single elementary school. We are no longer going to look at how a school district's doing or how a school's doing. We're going to look at the growth of a child. We are no longer going to pass kids after 3rd grade if they can't read. One of the things that the teacher said was it sits so heavy in them, having to pass a student forward out of the political pressure from the school districts, knowing that the child can't read. So now we're going to focus on the growth of a child. We're going to make sure we do summer camps in areas like Clarendon and Dillon and Allendale, so that when their parents go off and work, they're in a summer camp where they're learning reading, writing, math, but they're learning life skills so that they can grow up to be productive citizens and their parents know they're safe. So reading was one aspect of it. The second aspect, technology. We deal with it every day. Our children should be dealing with it every day in schools. So now in every school district, internet will be to the schools, internet inside the schools, one-to-one computing so that they are all working on tablets and the information that they're learning is designed on that tablet as well. But if there was anything the teachers taught me, they said don't send us the first piece of equipment unless you teach us how to use it. So we are doing training to all the teachers to make sure they know how to use this equipment before the students even get to it. By doing these two things, by making this change, it's an $180 million change, but we didn't raise a single tax to do it. We didn't take away from a single school district. We just said we are now going to make education a priority in South Carolina. And I will tell you that I am proud to report that both the House and the Senate passed that proposal yesterday. And what that means for us is in 2 years we will see a dramatic difference in reading in all school districts. In 3 years, if we keep this up, every school district, regardless of where it is, will be on the same level when it comes to technology. So we are going to move South Carolina forward. So when anybody says that the American dream is dead, when anybody says what happened, we now can say, in the state of South Carolina, the American dream is alive and well for every man, every woman, and every child in the state of South Carolina. Thank you very much. God bless you. Thank you. And now we will open it up for any questions that you may have. Yes, sir.
It is said that there is a glut of college graduates and a terrific shortage of craftsmen, not only in South Carolina, but across the country. And I'm wondering if your education initiative is going to address that issue.
On the college graduates versus the craftsmen that we need?
Yes.
So basically this is what we did. What we started is that education conversation that I had is not a one-year conversation. I'm going to do that every single year. You're going to see new education initiatives every single year. What you will see is we are starting a lot of science and math STEM classes within the technical schools. A lot of what we are seeing in the companies in these jobs, these are great paying jobs, and they're not university jobs. These are jobs that you can get out of high school. These are jobs that you can get with just 1 year of technical school or 2 years of technical school. And these are jobs that if you want to go on to university, you can. I think that the next path you're going to see us go down is we are now going to focus on dual track to where they can start to do that to make sure that that can happen. We are already piloting that in a couple of technical schools. We're heavily being aggressive with that in the technical schools now because I do believe when you have these sorts of jobs, one, the companies need to know that they're getting what they need. Two, you've got all these kids that are ready to take on these jobs that we absolutely want to show them that they can do. So yes, dual track is something that we're definitely going to look at. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Governor Bobby Curtis,
Hey,
I want
Bobby.
to commend you for supporting Teach for America.
Oh, love it.
$2 that one is now a manager for the zone in Williamsburg County. And I just think that not only the money that you're providing in schools, but the mentors that you're providing is a great resource for these at-risk youth. I want to thank you for your support of that.
Thank you very much. And he's talking about a program for Teach for America. It is a fantastic program that takes students that have graduated in education and puts them in rural or challenged school districts. It does as much for the school districts as it does for those young teachers that go in there, and it is a fantastic program. It will always be supported on my watch. Thank you. Yes.
I appreciate the 20% additional money is going to those counties that don't get as much money. And you're talking about redoing how we fund our schools. Here's what how will you overcome the greatest obstacle to that, which is the legislature? And most of us in the room, it's a great issue. How do you convince our representatives to give up 20%?
So basically, the way we did it, and keep in mind it passed yesterday, so it's done. All of that passed yesterday, so we have officially now changed the education funding formula. We didn't take from any districts. We held every district harmless, and that's the way it needed to be done. Good school districts need to stay good. We don't need to bring them down to lift others up. We just needed to lift them up. The difference is, and this is, if there's anything that I can tell you, is the legislators will talk about how tough the budget is. This is about priorities. Think about your household. Think about your business. You prioritize how you spend your money. That's all we did, was we prioritized and said, this is the year we need to focus on education. This is the year we need to make it happen. And when we did it, I made a point to show them how to do it, how to do the math, how to do the money, where to pull it from, how to get it there. And once they saw it was doable, and once they saw that none of their school districts were hurt in the process, and that we didn't raise taxes, it was a no-brainer.
Where did the money come from?
What you had was, for example, the way they had weighted it was you would get more per student if you were a senior versus a third grader, which really doesn't make sense. That's an old model of doing. So we changed it to where now it's about poverty. But still, because we focused on reading and technology, a lot of those funding formula ways of doing things were archaic and old. We still want to collapse it more. The funding formula is too complicated. But what we did was we removed some revenue streams and put it in there. And at first, I'll be honest with you, our superintendents, they had their treasurers all look at it. They didn't trust us. They didn't think it would work. And it does. And we'll do that again in year 2, in year 3, in year 4. This is about saying, if we're going to have these great jobs, if we're going to continue to move South Carolina forward in the eyes of the country the way we are, you've got to invest in education to make that happen. I want all of our children to stay in South Carolina. I want our grandchildren to stay in South Carolina. This will ensure that they can stay in South Carolina and do the jobs that we have coming in. Yes. So Mary's question was, what do we think about Common Core? And Common Core, I will tell you where I come from and where I always come from, which is when it comes to healthcare, I don't want national healthcare, I want it managed by the states. When it comes to education, I don't want it nationalized, I want it from the states. When it comes to regulations, I will always be that way. What Common Core did was basically say we're going to educate all children by the same standards. So whether you're a child in California, you're going to be taught the same way in South Carolina. It's not what we want. It's not what we do. We are different. We've got to make sure that we're focused on math and science and the jobs that we have to offer. So I'm against Common Core. We passed a bill that rolls back Common Core, and so within a year you will see Common Core go away. Thank you. Yes.
Stevie Johnson, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
I was listening to you speak about the dying dream, and I would say all of us in the room deeply believe the dream to be alive, as we do for our children. But I noticed when we talk about funding, there's a significant, perhaps even majority group that we frequently leave, because we talk about deep poverty, and I followed school issues, particularly Richland too, for a good number of years, and then we have us. But we haven't talked about middle performing children in education, but then outside of education, middle performing people at large in the communities. Would you just take a second to address how these initiatives support the middle class or middle performing students, just middle people?
So in general, when it comes to the average students, those students that don't go high or low, bottom line is I've always believed that if you lift all people up, everybody goes up with that. And when it comes to education, if we educate to the bottom, you're going to go to the bottom. If you educate to the top, you're going to raise everybody up and go to the top. So we want to make sure that we're aggressive with our students, letting them know they can be anything. It was very, very important to me to make sure that kids in Allendale didn't look at kids in Lexington and think they deserved better. Or that kids in Orangeburg didn't look at kids in Greenville and say, I guess I'm not that good. It is important for all kids to feel like they are worthy. So when you start to see these funding changes, when they start to see that they get tablets, and they start to see reading coaches in their schools, and they start to see companies getting involved, which is what you're going to see next in education, that's going to lift up the morale and the confidence of the kids, which is so important. What we've really focused on is those kids coming right out of college or right out of high school. What do we need to do to make them stay? That was important to me because we saw a lot of kids leaving. And over the last 3 years, believe it or not, what we had to change in South Carolina was a culture. We had a very negative culture. We were negative on ourselves. We were always putting ourselves down. We thought that the rest of the country looked down on South Carolina. And the reason of me doing it, answering the phone calls and all of these things, was to lift up the fact that if we aren't proud of ourselves, who else is going to be proud of us? And now when you go outside of the state, what I love is everybody smiles on South Carolina. But more importantly, when you talk to people around the state, South Carolinians are proud. They're proud of the fact that we're improving education. They're proud of the fact that we're increasing jobs. They're proud of the fact that we're #1 in all of these things, and they now want to be a part of it. We will have, nationally, you will see the middle class is stagnant. And that's something we're seeing. The lower class is coming up, the upper class is staying exactly, is continuing to do what they do, and the middle class is stagnant. I believe that changes with jobs. That's why you see me so aggressive on bringing jobs in, because when these good paying jobs come in, a lot of what we're focusing on is retraining of the people that we already have. One of the initiatives that I did was I partnered with the company ACT, the testing company. They are known to be experts in workforce training. And I wanted them to know that we're bringing all these new jobs, and it's important to me that South Carolinians get these new high-paying jobs. So we've said we wanted to get every county nationally work-ready certified. Every county in South Carolina participated. In order to get certified, you had to have a certain percentage of national certifications that were passed by people in the county. You had to have a certain number of public-private partnerships. They had to pass a certain percentage of soft skills, which has always been an issue in South Carolina. And you had to improve graduation rates in that county. Of every county that participated across the state, the very first county to get nationally certified, Clarendon County. Now, what does that tell us? It's not about wealth. It's not about education. It's not about population. It's about the fact that people in Clarendon County, when tested, when given the opportunity, they stepped up and said, we deserve better. Second county to get certified, Colleton County. Third county to get certified, McCormick County. I love that because they basically told the state, they told the country, we deserve better and we're going to prove it ourselves. And they did. They put skin in the game. So now what's happening? Companies are calling Commerce and they want to know about Clarendon and Colleton and McCormick. That's how this works, is we're lifting everybody up so that they're part of the new South Carolina, the new jobs that are coming in, the new environment that's being created. That's how I believe we'll lift up the middle class, is by allowing them more opportunities and options to do better. Thank you. Yes.
I'm going to apologize first because I'll never ask a question as eloquently as Stevie does. I hate to even follow you, but I'm Diane Junis. I work for Palmetto Health Foundation as a fundraiser, primarily working to secure funding for Palmetto Health Children's Hospital. And it breaks my heart that on a daily basis, the staff at Children's Hospital see severe shortage of providers, physicians that are trained in this area. And yet, one of the bigger issues is that, these physicians are not compensated for the time they spend when it comes to testifying and providing that service. The reimbursement just isn't there. The Department of Social Services, of course, most of us have seen, it's been in the paper every day, it's been in the news. I don't know that I always agree that by, changing the leadership, it solves the problem, but I guess I'm wondering, what is your plan to address this issue? It's not one that I want to see our community push under the rug, and it is something that we should be ashamed of.
Well, and this is, I think you said it appropriately. This is a big issue. Changing the leader in and out doesn't do anything. It's easy for people to complain about something, and this is what I've said to the legislature. It's easy to complain about it. You come help me fix it. Because the one thing I was most concerned about when I came into office was DSS. Because it's such a no-win agency. This is a very sad agency. Because what we do every day is try and protect children from their very own parents. I mean, this is a situation that when you look at baby Robert that was in the papers recently, this child had been beaten so bad by his own parents that when the caseworker went to show up with law enforcement, they switched him out with his cousin so that they would not see him. It is very hard to take on a situation like that and beat it. And so even though we begged the courts, DSS begged the courts to take baby Robert out of his home, the judge ruled against it. So there's a lot of factors that go into DSS. Having said that, there's a couple things we have already done. This is a political year. And unfortunately, when it's a political year, I personally have been very sad at the fact that they politicize dying children. Because as long as I'm in office, children will die. And as long as I'm in office, it will never get easier for me to accept or for me to walk out knowing that this won't happen. But what I can do is make the quality of life or the decision-making around it different. What we did was, 2 years ago, we saw problems in Greenville County. The caseworkers weren't responding well. So we sent in a rapid response team in Greenville County to just do more training, to try and get the supervisors in there, all of those things. We have now done the same thing in Richland County. It was really bad in Richland County. And now we've gotten it to where every case is being seen within 24 hours. There's no wait. We've moved it forward. We brought in a team. We're doing some things that are different. Overall, what you will see that we want to do in DSS is we have to change and improve the quality of the foster care. So there are a lot of families in South Carolina that say, I'll take a kid, and they do it, but the quality of those families needs to be good. It can't be people that just want to check. And that's a concern that we have. The second thing we've got to do is, caseworkers, this is a hard job. Imagine going in every day and this is all you see are, people complaining about children being abused. You get caught between husbands and wives, you get caught between grandparents and children. It becomes a hearsay situation. It is not easy to observe in 15 minutes what you think the problem is. So I think people need to understand these caseworkers are doing the best they can, but when they see it over and over again, what happens? They get immune to some of it. So we are now saying we need more eyes on every case. So we're making sure that that we're rotating supervisors so that different eyes are on the case so that somebody can say, you know what, that's just not right. That needs to be different. We're going to do different things like that, and then also try and make sure that the reporting of what we do. One of the things we found out is it should be common sense, but it's not, so we've made it a rule that if you can't find the family in 72 hours after a complaint has been made about a child, call law enforcement. Well, caseworkers didn't do that. In this past case, they didn't call in 72 hours because all the notes they were leaving in the door were being taken. So they thought that the parents were getting the messages. You still call law enforcement. So a lot of this is communicating with caseworkers, trying to get them to understand each case is different, trying to make sure there's supervisors in there. Training we do constantly. DSS is constantly doing new training. But I do think that putting quality
Foster families will make a difference. We have seen our adoption rates have gone up. You know, those things we want to make sure we do. But it's a hard situation. Anybody that says there's a silver bullet, there's just not. What we will do is every day I will focus on improving DSS in every agency, but making sure that those children are safe is something that we'll continue to do. We do have, providers do continue to be a problem because nobody wants to take that small amount of money, but we always sit there and we score our providers and make sure that we're getting the best ones in there that we can. But, you know, this is not an easy fix, but it's one that we'll continue to work on every day. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Governor, Mark Sullivan, I want to put you on the spot.
It's okay, I'm used to it.
Your initiatives that you're working on, especially the education initiatives. A number of us are very confused by the large number of people who are vying for superintendent of the state and trying to figure out who would best facilitate your initiatives. Is there any way you might be able to whisper to us? And I've got a clue how to talk.
You ready?
Ready?
Okay, so this is, let's look at the bigger issue. We passed something pretty amazing, and I think most people don't realize it's a big deal, but it is. I think 2 days ago I passed a bill that will now send to the ballot, allow you to decide whether a governor can appoint her adjutant general or not. We are the only state in the country that still elects an adjutant general. Now, I don't know how many of you can name who he is, but what worries me is we have had pharmacists run for that position before. We've had other people run that have no military background whatsoever. That's the real focus of what it is. So in the time that I've been here, we now have, and this is the last time you will vote on a lieutenant governor. From now on, after me, I don't get any of it, but after me, governor and lieutenant governor will be on the same ticket. It's a team that you will vote for, and I am so excited by that because that was something I pushed very hard for because you need to have both of those wings working together. We did it with the adjutant general. We now no longer have a budget control board. We've got a department administration like every other state in the country. We were the only ones that hadn't done that. We now have an inspector general that an employee can call in, and if they see waste, fraud, or abuse, they can anonymously report it, and that happens. My point is, superintendent of education needs to be appointed. It needs to be appointed because of all the things that I do. One of the most important things I do is education. Yet, I have a person over here who does their own thing, and I don't have that. This is where you can help. We are 2 votes short in the Senate. 2 votes. This vote will come up next year. Everybody starts to realize now what it means for a governor and a superintendent to work together in tandem going forward. So I hope that we don't have any more superintendent of education elections, is my point. And if you can talk to your senators here in Richland County, that will be very, very important. In terms of Tuesday, I mean, I wish I could help you. What I would tell you is they all say something, they all claim they work with me, that's not it. I mean, I think I watched the debate myself to try and figure out what's going to happen. We'll see Tuesday. But if anything, if I get that across, let's appoint our superintendent so we don't have to go through that. Yes, Edie.
Governor, I would just like to say, 20 years ago, I was a member of the foster care review board, both at a local and state level, and I can tell you that those same issues and concerns about that we're having now were going on back then, and I just applaud you for taking the time to do something different, to try to make a difference.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll keep working hard. Are you standing up for a reason? One more question. Make it a good one. Yes.
I don't know how good it's going to be, but with respect to the funding formula, is the emphasis going to be more on teacher pay or bricks and mortar within these each?
Okay, so right now it's neither, because in this 1 year, our focus was making sure that operations, that the money was actually getting to those school districts. So our Allendales and Barnwells and Bambergs and Dillons, they're now going to get more per child so that they can actually do more with the kids. Now, going forward, we've got things to look at. Our teacher pay is right at the southeastern average. But I do think that people are saying maybe we need to get it up. And one of the things I'm concerned about is I need good teachers in those rural areas. And a lot of that is going to require incentives to get someone to want to live in Denmark, to want to live in Barnwell and Hampton and those areas. So that is a conversation that we're having with the superintendents. Bricks and mortar, big issue. That's something else we need to address, because if you do all these great things on the inside, one of the things that bothers me is I still go through schools and they're leaking. And teachers are walking in raincoats and rain slippers and all of these other things. So we've got some areas that do need some improvement. What I love, though, is the very first year I said, let's talk about education. The very first year we put a plan in place, everybody followed it. It was not controversial at all. And I hope that shows you the legislature, regardless of party, is ready. The business people were all behind it. The education government side of thing was all behind it. Everybody gets the fact that the time is now. And so for me, that's very promising, so that as we talk this summer to decide what next year's initiatives are going to be, that they are starting to move. And that was the goal I told my team, was if we pass it this year, there'll be momentum. There'll be, motivation to do that. So look, if we can turn around and look back years from now and say that was the time they changed education, it's going to make a lot of difference for the better. Thank you for taking the time this evening. Thank you for
Okay, y'all probably don't want to hear from me, but I've got two things to say. One is congratulate our club for once again asking just great questions and very respectful questions. And the other thing is, and Governor Haley's walking out on me, but I was going to ask her whether she remembered the first time she met me, because I remember the first time that I met her. And it was at West Columbia Rotary Club, and I was selling nuts. She was speaking, and there were like 5 Republican candidates for governor, and she was probably number 4, maybe number 5. But I mean, I thought her message was so good, and it wasn't a political message or anything like that. So I didn't think that she would be governor. So I invited her to come and speak to us. And she did about 2 or 3 months later. When she came and stood at this podium back at that time, well, she was still probably number 3, but her candidacy just started climbing once she came to Spring Valley. And I wanted to let her know that.